So lessons we learned and lessons we're still learning. My question is, should the adults learn in principle? Should this generation learn, or we are savvy enough and we shouldn't? I guess the answer is yes, we should, right? So I looked at this funny things. I found them on internet. I thought, really, when history goes backwards, you learn that today parents would prefer children not to play video games but watch TV. 50 years ago, you would rather watch TV because TV was so new. 500 years ago, you would rather do what you do, but many, many, many thousands years ago, I wish my children were staying at home. And every generation is not happy with its younger generation, which is pretty amazing, but again, the law of life. So I went backwards as early enough as Socrates, and Socrates is one of the first known contemplating about the younger generation, and the younger generation in his eyes was horrible. That's what he wrote about the younger generation. I'm not going to read out loud, but you see it well, right? So if we think about the people who are criticizing young generations today, not much is different. Not much is different. So what is it? Law of life, human nature, or both, or something else? Older generations always think they know better, and we're all kind of older generation in comparison with our students in schools, right? So the question for me is, that's from Korczak, and that's from the book, When I'm Little Again. And he is one smart adult who can step into the shoes of a child and think as a child and learn from children. And that's what he says. And that's a completely different perspective. So,
I'm sorry, I'm with the picture program.
Sure. Come on. What program?
Picture.
Oh, yeah, but we haven't seen you before.
Yeah, I think there were like a few.
Oh,
of us
different
that
people.
come in.
Okay, come on in, please.
She's an adolescent medicine physician.
Oh, okay.
With our team.
Sure.
Has
Okay, so if you look at the last phrase, which is kind of fascinating for me, grown-ups will say that people will never have wings. But I was a grown-up once, and I say, yes, they could have wings. If I tell you now, imagine you are a butterfly, let's fly. How many of you will be able to fly? Not thinking, this woman is crazy.
Sorry, not thinking what?
Not thinking that I'm crazy, suggesting this. There was, I'm sure you know the name of Anton Chekhov, who was a very famous writer and playwright. He had a brother who is less famous in the world, but quite famous still. He was an actor, and in his senior years, he became a theater teacher. So, Michael Chekhov. So one of the lessons he was teaching was he needed his students learn how to walk properly and how to be able to transform in anything. So he was teaching it like, imagine you are a crystal vase. Stay as a crystal vase, behave as a crystal vase. You are afraid they will drop you and you will break into pieces, and others walk around, the distance is very close, be careful, she is a crystal vase. You need not to touch her, or if you touch so gently that she won't break. So, and adults were able to do it, but those were adults who were learning how to become actors and actresses. And he was an adult, but he was an actor himself. But here, an older man, who is an educator, who is definitely not an actor, but the one who preserved a child within himself. And that's quite a different story, but apparently same story. He can do it, he can fly. So, lessons we learned from Korczak. I put together lessons I learned. They are all based on Korczak's words. What we will do next, we will go through every slide, discuss every lesson I learned, and it's not everything I put here, but kind of key ones. And then I would love you to add at least one, or you stop me on any slide saying, this is the one which is mine, like this is the most important for you, okay? Or I'm sure you got something else from Korczak. So let's start from my first lesson. So this is what I learned. I don't know, I search, I ask questions. By deepening, I complicate. Every elsewise is a new stimulus for the efforts of thought. As a result of these trials and tribulations, teachers construct their own practical knowledge. There are thoughts that can be born only of your own pain, and precisely those are the most precious ones. What do you think of that? So let's talk on each slide. And whoever wants to talk, just go ahead.
I just feel like the last sentence really resonates with me because Korczak says there are thoughts that can be born only of your own pain, and then precisely those are the most precious ones. Because personally, I feel that if somebody have going through like hard times and pain, then the person can be more empathy for other people because they know how it feels.
Okay. But you're talking about physical pain.
No, like
Any
physical,
pain.
mentally, and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Jane?
I'm sorry, I was thinking of something completely different.
Okay.
I
Yeah,
was
sure.
wondering if there was any way today, if we're going to do this, to configure us so that we can see each other's faces more.
That's a great idea. So
If
because they are all on wheels, so come closer, we'll make a circle and you'll see faces, yeah. Because you don't need the internet or a computer now. I will share this,
Like how we're gonna sit here.
or you can take these chairs, you don't even need to move. Yeah, take these chairs, take them out, and we'll see each other. Sarah, come on. Yeah, and we have chocolates here. We usually have chocolates.
I'm not going to get away with not eating. Just to initiate you.
Unless you can diabetes. Are you good? Okay, great. So we have a survey. So, who wants to talk on this?
I'm just thinking about how,
By the way, do we need a microphone to make it better?
I think if we're sitting in a circle, that's fine.
It's
Because
fine?
we're projecting to
Do you
people.
need a microphone?
No, I'm trying to see people's faces.
Yeah, it's a good idea, and actually, I wanted to have a room which is different, but, well, that's, yeah,
Next time.
yeah, next time. Who was speaking?
I was speaking.
Yeah, Claire, yeah.
Or trying to.
Yeah, please, sorry.
Trying to explain what I think, but to me, this speaks to just how when you experience something, it's completely different than trying to sort of understand it from someone else's perspective. Even though we can empathize when you experience it, you get that knowledge in a whole different kind of way, and that helps you relate to the world on a deeper level. And even if your story isn't the same as somebody else's story, once you've gone through pain and you understand the process of going through pain and gaining that knowledge that way, you can relate to people on that human level, because that's all part of the human experience.
Okay.
Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah,
It does make sense.
yeah, well,
As a teacher, it resonates with me because like all the new teachers I meet, they always say, oh, I can't wait to be in my 5th year, 6th year, because I wouldn't have more work to do. And I said that's not true, because each year is different, each group is different, and you have to wait until you see your students to be able to prepare your class, because depending on who is in the class, your lesson will be different. And if you repeat the class, it won't. If you teach like the same class to different students,
yeah,
it will never be the same ever.
of course, it depends on the students, right? Okay, girls?
I see a lot of positive out of that lesson, that he refers to complications, searching, trials and tribulations, and this pain, but at the bookend of every of those thoughts, there's a lot of genesis that comes out of it. There's a lot of development, a lot of creation, and so for me, redefines the purpose of that pain that goes through.
Okay. I'm talking about the lessons I learned from Korczak, and we're talking on each, and then you will add whatever you want in terms of lessons. Anyone else?
I think one of the hardest things is to accept that there will always be trials and tribulations, that it will always be bumpy. I mean, I think it might be human nature to think that you would get, it's like when I was a child, I thought, when I get to be 21, I'll be a grown-up and it'll be all sorted.
Yeah.
From then on, it's just going to be smooth, and then, I mean, it's almost like every year, and every time I would teach, I would think, this time,
Perfect.
and finally,
Yeah.
somewhere I woke up and went, no, it's always going to be bumpy. It's like,
It's the law of life.
it's like the grain of sand in the oyster brings the pearl, but you have to have the grain of sand. And to accept that, I think it's actually, it's inspiring. It's like
It's called wisdom.
yeah.
Okay? So lesson number 2, they are not because one is more important than the other. This one in particular, I invite you to read yourselves, but this one I think is absolutely brilliant. And I would love to talk more about that because we never mentioned it. You know what came to my mind when I was reading this, and of course I knew it before, but when I reread it, I remembered Claire's example about dead ends from your nephew. Do you remember this example she brought in? No? Yeah. So,
The pets, yeah.
the pets, yeah. Dead ends as pets, yeah. Okay, so what do you think of this?
hardest thing to do, to witness and not judge and not project and not do all those things, to simply witness and be with. And
Be
see
with,
what comes.
yeah, be with,
I
yeah.
think it's the hardest. Every day I struggle with that. I know it, and I have to remind myself and remind myself and remind myself.
Okay. Alice, how does that feel? You work with the youngest in the group, yeah?
Yeah.
So how does that feel? They're kind of last, the least experienced in comparison.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm like a child working with them. Because like always be with a child and kind of thinking in a child way. Well, that was just easy for me to do. So
Which is perfect.
yeah,
For the
it feels
kids.
good.
Yeah, yeah.
But sometimes when you talk with adults, they feel, oh, how come you talk like a child? That's not okay. For them, they are okay because they're not okay because seems like you are kind of naive. But I just don't think that's naive.
Well, it's interesting, the word naive and the concept of naivety has kind of derogatory meaning for many people. When adults say you are naive, it has negative connotation. But do you think being naive is always bad or bad at all?
No, I think it takes away the shoulds. As we get older, there's a lot of shoulds about how I should do something, or
Yeah, or
and-
must.
or must,
Or
or-
want to.
yeah. So it's that what could be, what might be, but it gives more openness to different outcomes.
And it's a kind of innocence, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. That's what I say.
Yeah, for me, when I hear innocence, I'm thinking if innocence is not ignorance, I'm totally fine with it. But if innocence is because of ignorance, then it kind of puzzles me in adults. Secret, what do you think?
Of this quote,
Yeah.
it reminds me of that video that we watched, the one with the kids. One where they just watched, and then especially when was it the seesaw? No, the swing.
Yeah.
The swing, where they started like that's kind of what it reminded me of. And sometimes
Okay.
kids just need to work it out, and
Uh-huh.
like to put it to lesson 1 too. Like I feel like sometimes they need to experience, and we just need to watch, and that's how they learn.
And that's the hardest part, not to say, yeah, careful, careful, don't do that, don't touch, not so, I'm talking about myself. That's exactly how I would react. But yeah, I guess we need to resist the temptation. So here's the one, which is the epigraph to the book we were planning to discuss today. The book, When I'm Little Again. And this is the epigraph to the adult reader, which Korczak put up front to start the book. And this is a dialogue with the adult reader, kind of. So he's saying, you say, meaning you adult, say dealing with children are tiresome, you're right. You say because we have to lower ourselves to their intellect, lower, stoop, I like the words, yeah, stoop, bend, crouch down. You are mistaken. It isn't that which is so tiring, but because we have to reach up to their feelings, reach up, stretch, stand on our tiptoes, as not talk. This is how the book starts. What do you think?
Actually, because I taught to kindergarten grade 1 theater in French, and I always thought that working with children is tiring physically because you move a lot with them and you have to think a lot. But when you rest, then you're fine. When you work with adults, I find it's tiring because it's all mental and starts going around, and even if you rest, actually you can't even rest because you're always thinking. So I find that it's not true.
This is not true?
I don't find it tiresome. I find it more, like giving
Okay.
more energy.
Okay.
I think children like challenge you to be like a better person in working with them, and that, I don't know if it's, I mean, yeah, it can be tiring because
Do you
it's
think
something that
they
you
intentionally
consciously
challenge
think
you,
about.
or it's not?
No, I don't think it's
they- By their
intentional.
behavior?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's intentional. I
Okay.
think that we need to be thoughtful and intentional, and that part is the part that's a challenge.
Okay.
I don't know if being them intentionally challenging us is a bad thing. They should be challenging us. We're supposed to be there to support them. They're supposed to be asking for guidance and challenging us to.
No, the question is whether they do it intentionally.
That's
Do
their,
they?
I think so. Well, I think that's they're supposed.
Well, the word suppose, yeah, well, they're supposed to do what they want to do, right? So the question is, when children ask you questions or do something which you don't expect, and they are kind of, provoking you, if you wish, do they do it intentionally always? What do you think? Well,
No, I think they're exploring where boundaries are, where what is okay with this person, which we all do as adults all the time. We just, it's quicker for us.
Yeah.
And we're also making assumptions, which may be inaccurate, but we learn to do that to be efficient.
and we know formal boundaries.
And we know like those rules of
Yeah,
engagement
yeah.
with each other, whereas kids might even know, but then want to test it, want to experiment that
Okay,
this is the line with this person.
okay. What else?
I think just compared with adults, children are more unpredictable because they always want to explore something new. So it may seem to us it's tiring because we don't know what they're gonna do next. So, but also it makes every day really fun working with them because every day is very new experience. And also I think that I just said, work with children maybe physically you're gonna move with them and maybe make you tired, but mentally, because you don't really have any stress because if they want something they will tell you directly. But for many adults they don't say it directly. You have to figure out. So I think that's the difference.
Children are not passive aggressive.
True. So
That's what
Yeah.
when I hear what you were saying, it's like children are,
Yeah.
they're honest.
Yeah.
When I started in theater, I worked in children's theater and I toured, I acted in a lot of shows. And children's audiences are the best teachers because if what you are doing is honest and engaging, you could hear a pin drop unless they laugh.
Yeah.
The minute that you're phony, just even the tiniest, they start to talk to themselves. And they instantly give you feedback, so you learn by doing. And they don't just sit there politely.
There's a fantastic Russian movie which is called A Magic Power of Art. And one of the scenes in this movie is a group of elementary school graders. I'm not sure it's translated into English, but just in case, yeah. There's an incredible scene there. An elementary school group comes to the movie theater. It's like 1970s, I think. And what they watch is the Civil War, that is 1920s. And if you remember the history, it's white guards and red guards. So, and they are watching this battle between the white guards and red guards. And red guards are kind of shaky at the moment and not very strong. And the kids jump out of their seats and start, shouting, "Be strong, we'll help you." And then they took out their small things, I'm not sure how you call them, like a small piece out of wood, and then you use a rubber on it.
Slingshot.
Yeah, and started shooting, helping the red guards to fight and win over the white guards. And it was so real that it was almost surreal, yeah? Here they are in the movie theater, and all of a sudden, this magic power of art brings them up and they act as if they are right there in the fields. Can you imagine adults behaving like this? Hardly. Unless you are the adult like Korczak, which is extremely rare. So who can say that this is something you would take as a lesson for yourself?
I just wanted to bring up the voice of the youth as well. So I mostly work with teenagers, and I
Yeah.
think that it's very true that youth are more emotionally attuned to what's happening, and to keep up with what they're feeling takes a lot out of you, because you have to go back to that place in your mind. And even though like he's using the word tiring, like yes, it does take.
Well,
energy,
he of
but-
course doesn't think this
Yeah.
way. He's putting it this way for us to talk about it.
Mhm.
Okay? So, lesson number 4. Well, no, stay here. Children are not a casual encounter who can be passed by hurriedly or dismissed rapidly with a smile and a hello. Children account for a large proportion of mankind. Remember, Jonathan was talking about in different countries it could be 60% of the population. 60% of the population. And we consider them not ready yet. We decide for them. Children have been, are, and will be. So, anything here?
I think it goes back to that children are people now. You're not the people they were.
Yeah. And some actually don't have long lives, unfortunately. They're not destined to have them. Claire?
And just the value of like taking the time to get down on the same level as a child and connect with the child and that sort of conveys that respect and that value of that being.
And again, not to bend down, but to lift for the child or children, yeah?
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about when you pass by people and you say, hello, how are you, and you keep going.
Yeah, I'm great, yeah. Only my wife has a cancer, yeah, but I'm great, yeah. Oh, great, yeah, and just passing by. Yeah, so children deserve our attention, and they could be very, very deep, and deep in grief as well, by the way. And this is also very important to remember. Lesson number 5, we were talking about it many times, but I decided to keep it here because I think it's extremely important. And each time I remind you, I remind myself as well. What is needed is a guide who will politely answer, because we don't dismiss stupid questions of adults. We try to find the explanation to this stupidity, but we dismiss even bright questions from children because they're children. And there's a joke when the father is driving through the countryside and the little boy is sitting behind and the mother next to him, and the boy keeps saying, "Oh, Daddy, why is the sun so bright today?" And the father says, "I don't know." "Oh, Daddy, look at this cloud, it looks like a sheep. Why is that?" "I don't know." "Oh, Daddy, look at this." "I don't know." And the mother says, "Stop bothering Daddy. He's driving." And Daddy says, "Oh, it's okay, let him ask." Let him ask. And I would keep saying, "I don't know." So, familiar, right? Sounds kind of, but that's what's happening. So if we expect questions, children expect answers, and then they stop questioning. And then we inquire, what happened? Why didn't you ask?
What do you think Korczak would say if he was driving the car?
Well, first, I don't think he would, but second, I think he would have been answering, because as we all know, it's possible to answer even when you are driving a car, clearly. I think he would get into explanations, Alice.
Yeah, I think it's okay if you really don't know, but if you.
Oh, yeah, of course,
Yeah,
of course.
explore with children, that would be great. And sometimes like parents, they're just really, really tired, they're burnt out, they really don't have the energy. So what we, like in our school, what we always suggest parents, like you get more support if you can. For example, if you like one day you can spend, like you can invite like grandparents to come to like play with the kids, and you have some time for your own, because parents do need that break to like temporarily be away from the child and get some fresh, to refresh themselves. That's very, very important. Same for the educator as well.
I think Korczak would say, why do you think? And ask the child questions and value that child's
Excellent.
imagination. or
Excellent. I was about to say, when the adult doesn't know, the most appropriate thing is to say, what do you think? And the child would always know why the sun is bright and the sky is that blue, this shape of blue or shade of blue, and why the cloud is of this shape, not different. The child would immediately explain. Right? And as we were talking about it before, children love to be our teachers. We just need to give them this opportunity more often. And not because we are pretending, but because apparently they know a lot through observation as well. And we shut down on this kind of observation of the world because we're always in a hurry. There's an incredible French novel, I don't remember the title of it, and the woman in the main character, she's a very, as many of you, a very powerful, vibrant personality who lives her life speedily. You know what I mean? Like speedily. She gets up early in the morning, her whole day is scheduled, and she lives her life. And she walks to her office like really fast, and she bypasses everyone in the street. Kind of like New York, you would walk, you don't see people, you just navigate through, right? And at some point in her life, all of a sudden, there's no like logical reason, she decides she needs to slow down to the point that she moves into a senior home. And she's 50, like early 50. And one day, she starts walking in the street, like walking. And all of a sudden, she noticed, and it's the same street she's been walking for many years, right? And all of a sudden, she noticed, here's a flower. There's a tree here. And this person I see every day. And what is this person doing here on the bench? And all of a sudden, she discovered her life from a different perspective and different side. I'm not saying I can't relate to this speed, I can't, so far. But I mean, it's a very different perspective of life. What I'm saying is, children have a speedy life, but in a different way. They are fast, but they observe. They are fast, but they notice the details which we bypass and not notice. You know what I mean? Like when we're running to work or somewhere, we wouldn't notice a butterfly, what is the color of its wings, etc. Right? How the wind is blowing. No, it's just run through life.
And they do it with such wonder.
Yeah.
Well, it's the being present, like the mindfulness or the being present or being in the moment.
Being in the
And as
present,
adults,
yeah.
we get more either focusing on the past or the future.
Or the future, or the task, like
Yeah.
immediate future, like in
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I think for me, the greatest lesson that has been reinforced for these 8 days has been that the child is the teacher.
Mhm.
And it's like, somehow it feels to me like that's behind almost everything that he
True,
wrote,
true,
that
true.
he did. That's the fabric for it.
Those of you who, well, I'm sure each went through a school at some point in life. Did you ever have an experience when a teacher gave you an opportunity to be a teacher for your class for a day? Like self-governing school for one day and you are teaching and teachers are sitting in the same classroom, no? Yeah?
Yeah.
So, in my experience, it's a regular thing to do. Like once a year, children become administration teachers, etc. And teachers are just sitting at the back of the classroom and they're not allowed to do anything. I mean, other than being students. And students absolutely enjoy to the point of unbelievable being teachers. Why is that? They're not like, you know, thinking, oh, okay, on that day I'll show you. No. They are very generous, but they love being teachers, being in the position of standing here next to the teacher's desk, presenting, and they have to prepare. It takes a lot of time and energy, and they do it, and they love it, and they give those grades to all the students, and they're very generous with their grades, but they're also very objective. They might say, you know what, it's absolutely poor today, it should be unsatisfactory, but I won't give you unsatisfactory, you need to work harder. And you sit there at the back and you hear yourself, yeah? Only children are much more generous. Or why are you late? Oh, it's okay, come on in. I mean, there's no talk next to the door. What is it? What's the reason? You shouldn't.
Even before, being like 3 or 4-year-olds, they love to play school. That's what.
Exactly. That's one of role plays they start with.
Yeah.
Either family, mother and children, and they love playing mothers, of course. Yeah.
Teacher.
Yeah. And then there comes school. Yeah. And they play very, very fair schools, very just communities, right? So, does it tell you something? Even kids who go through bad schools, why is that?
Because they know what experience they want to have versus the one they did have.
So, inside they know how it should be. Yeah, like on an irrational level even, they know that this is not just, this is not fair, this is not cool. Let me show the teacher how it should be. The problem is for a teacher to learn, to notice, and to analyze why is the child is doing it this way? Maybe I've been doing something wrong, you know? So that's another thing which teachers could do. Try it in your classes. Give children an opportunity to be a teacher for a class or a whole day, or ruling the whole school, like being a school principal. We had it too. That was absolutely fun. Yeah, they were more strict than school principals. Yeah, they were very serious, yeah. But it worked, it worked. So when adults think that children would create mess, it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly, they are quite organized when they are in charge. And they know it's not for a minute, it's just whole day. So for children, that's another thing. There's a children's poem which ends with the words, because time is rubber, you can stretch it as much as you want. So if you think in this perspective, the longer I live, the more I feel time becomes more and more speeding for me. Like 2 in the morning, now it's already middle of the day, right? But for children, 1 day is quite a duration. Have you ever thought of that? That we have very different concept of time. And so for a child, being in charge for a day, it's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, next. I put it on purpose for medical professionals. But I want to remind you one more time, we were talking about the last phrase from this quote. But in fact, the whole idea about the diagnosis, are you comfortable there? Yeah? The whole idea of a diagnosis, because the word diagnosis comes from the medical vocabulary, and teachers hardly ever use it. But if you think processing, not saying it out loud, but processing, we do need to give a diagnosis and to actually decide what kind of diagnosis is that, we need to observe and analyze. And the teacher who jumps at conclusions right away, that's like a bad nurse or doctor who would immediately say, oh yeah, I see, there's rash prednisone. That's the decision. And that would be a correct decision for that short period of time, but it could also ruin your immune system. So the same about teachers. Very often, more often than not, teachers make this very fast decisions and quick. Okay, misbehavior, there are rules, yeah, and do this, that, and stop that, without actually thinking, and what is it in reality? Maybe this child simply wants my attention, which is quite often the case. Let's look at this. Every symptom has a meaning, but look at the very last phrase. Well, read through, of course, but the very last phrase, I think, is particularly important. Every child care institution is a research territory and a child raising clinic. I'm thinking if to put it somewhere inside the foyer of every school, like you enter the school building and you learn that it's in fact not just a place where you bring knowledge to kids, it's something else. You want to say something?
I don't know, it just reminded me, in our school, whenever kids act out or whether there's a discipline problem, there's always something underneath that you have to go look at.
What could that be?
Yeah.
For example?
It could be something at home, it could be something with their friends, it could be like their fish died, it could be something. But not to take the action or reaction of the child for face value, and not that it's about the teacher, but it's about something else, and that's what makes it a lot more difficult.
But how would you diagnose what happened?
You ask. As much as you can, you ask.
Do you ask directly?
I don't, because I'm above my pay grade a little bit, but usually, like
But
people
teachers,
do.
yeah?
If it happens in my class, I do, but if it becomes like a big thing, then
Right.
usually the philosophy of the school is it's not to, like, you know, you cross the line, let's punish, but they kind of want to get to the bottom of it too, because there's always, like, you can treat the symptoms, but why not try and cure the disease instead? To put it into,
Sure.
since we're all medical right now, right? So try to find what the disease is, because you know, a cough can be, you can cure a cough, but a cough can be so many things underneath, right?
Yeah. And something much more serious could be
Yeah.
hidden.
It could just be a
behind
cough, it could just
yeah.
be, but it could also be something else.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so when we diagnose in medicine, William Osler is like a famous writer for medical education as well. He talks about your diagnosis rests on your history taking. So no matter how great your investigations or how great your lab tests are, your diagnosis goes with the history. So you need to capture that accurate history or that story really. But you're only going to get as good of a story, as good of a relationship you have with that. And a doctor-patient's relationship is the patient.
Excellent, yeah. So it's about relationships first. And the level of trust a child has, or a patient in this situation, has in you, or in the relationship with you, that this child would actually tell or not tell.
And it's like an art, and it's so like fluid and different with every patient that you interact with. So it's like, yeah, I don't know how to describe it in a better way, but every interaction is so unique and based around that individual person. And so how you do things with one patient is going to be different than how you do things with another patient. And it's being present with that person in that moment. And being able to explore things in a way that fits, hopefully, for them.
But don't you think that today's healthcare system and education system is much more working along the lines of protocol? Step 1 didn't work, step 2 didn't work, I'm taking step 3, 4, 5, in accordance with the protocol. And it's much easier, it takes away the responsibility from the teacher. You have a protocol, and you can always say, you know, as in this famous joke, the surgery went well, the patient died. So the protocol from A to Z, done. The patient died, the child is expelled, or something happened, but I did everything I could. But in fact not. In fact not. So because of that, pedagogy is considered arts and science together. It's never just research-based. Because if it's based on research, then how can you research every individuality? Because everyone is unique. You need this approach, which is what you were talking. Each time you have to reinvent how to approach this particular kid. But it's based on your knowledge, your previous knowledge, right? But you read in the person. You read the body language, you read the facial expression, you know the history of this person, you read. But you need to learn how to read, right? Because every gesture, every posture means something. I only recently learned, by the way, I'm absolutely ignorant about the body language as a theory. I recently learned that if you keep your hands like this, that while listening to somebody, don't you think that I'm watching you? No, I'm not judging. I just learned recently that if you keep your hands like this, that means you completely trust the person. Yeah. If you keep your finger next to your mouth, that means you disagree and you try to keep yourself together, not to jump up and tell a person right away that what you want to say. So there are lots of things which are small things and big things, but they will give you a clue what's happening with the child or a patient.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, because somehow people here all work within different systems, I mean, education,
Yeah.
medicine, law. How hard does the system support you in doing what we're talking about? Or how do you, that's what I thought you were gonna say.
I don't know if I'm
So
lucky enough to be able to
How
have
do,
that
how
support.
do you
Navigate the
navigate
system.
your way through? I mean, it seems like in some way this course is training us to be guerrilla warriors or something. I'm just curious about that.
Okay.
because-
Then
How
we will
systems do you have?
never have another one. Here we come to the, Alice.
So Jane, thank you for the question. Actually, I want to share with you that because I'm in the childcare system, which is not included in BC is not included in the education system, so it's more like a private thing that
Yeah.
in like different center they do. So I definitely feel like we don't get enough support, either from government or from like parents or because like as an easy like early childhood educator, they get paid really very low wages.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's definitely a big problem because now more and more great teachers they left the field because they feel they have to earn like more money to support the family, so they have to find another profession. That's the really big problem because we are losing people.
Which actually should be exactly the opposite.
Yes.
The younger the kids, the more salary should come to teachers because that's the most important
Yes.
period of life. Right?
Also, the way the system is built is like very segregated, like specialized. A child goes through so many people, he doesn't have a continuity, and
That's the circle of a child.
yeah.
Yeah, when all these people are brought together. Yeah, brought together and they can meet and talk.
And
And
it's rare, that's the exception.
of course it's rare, yeah. But that's the whole idea, that's where the proverb comes. You need a village to raise one child, and a village could be huge, or it could be 8 or 10 people. But what is interesting, in theory and practice of special education, this whole idea of a circle of a child existed for quite a while. When you would bring a family, this particular child or teenager or adult with special needs, and counsel and everybody who works with this person, and then you create a plan. It's not called exactly the circle of a child, but it's exactly what it is.
Yeah, I think there are sort of like integrated case management meetings that we do have that already exist. And however, I think the difference with the circle of the child is that the child's needs are really at the center.
At the center.
And that's the focus of the circle
No,
of
no,
the
it's
child.
special ed, it's the same thing. Yeah, at the center. But I can give you examples from American schools, like 20 years ago. I know one girl who is now over 30, and I knew her for the last 20, take two.
Everyone's addicted to chocolate now.
Yeah. For the last 2 weeks, but remember, it's the last day today, so no chocolate, sorry, yeah. I know her during the whole period, so and she has a brother, an older brother, and the parents are, a good family and enough funds and a lot of love and dedication to two kids. So the older son is absolutely physically and healthy and mentally great, a musician now. And the girl was born with a Down syndrome. So the mother was a biology professor at the University in California. With this girl, she decided to change the field, and she got her special education degree. And when the girl was of the school age, they put her into elementary school, like regular public elementary school, because that's the law. So, and they noticed that in a year, age 6 to 7, while she was just in the first grade, she so degraded mentally, and they couldn't get what was happening. And then it gives me, chills even to talk about it. What the mother learned was, during the break, the children, California, it's almost all the time. So the children are out playing in the schoolyard. So the teachers assumed that the girl would be aggressive. So they literally locked her in a kind of a cage. Yeah, so there was space with a metal door, and she could see through like bars, but she couldn't get out. She was locked in. And she couldn't play with anyone, and she was there, like a wild animal. And then during the class, they will bring her back. But during the recess, she would be sitting there, watching other kids play. And because of the Down syndrome and verbal difficulties, she couldn't tell her parents about it. And because this time happens during the time when the mother is working, right? No one saw it for the whole year. And then, kind of accidentally almost, the mother realized what was happening. And then there was totally different story, different school, and just whole different life story. So at some point, this family, because we had a couple of projects and the parents were involved, they brought the girl when she was 20 plus, I don't remember exactly, but an adult already. They brought her to Russia to this international conference. So the whole family, their brother, the mother, and the girl came to Russia, and we had this big conference. And we were sitting at a huge round table, like maybe 100 people, and everyone at some point was talking about their life dreams. And of course no one expected she would start talking, like first of all, she couldn't really speak well, and second of all, not in this huge group. But she can draw. And she herself got a big piece of paper and she drew, and when we saw what she did, it was literally unbelievable. She drew a house and a family and herself as a mother and 2 children and a car and a garden and life, which she dreams of, which she cannot verbalize, but it's a normal, regular dream. And when we passed that paper around the circle, and most of them were educators, many were in special ed, and they were mesmerized because they would never think the young woman with a Down syndrome would actually dream her dream the way any other young woman of her age would. Maybe not saying it.
Yeah, I was just going back to your question, Jane, about, so part of my role is, in my job, is basically saying the systems aren't working for this one person.
Mm-hmm.
So because the education system, healthcare, all these systems generally meet the needs, the basic needs of people, or meet what their criteria or standards are. But for the 10% on this end and 10% on this end, it doesn't. So you're trying to get a square peg into a round hole. So I love my job because really it's saying, how do we throw out the systems language, system stuff, and say, for this one person, it needs to adjust so that they can get what they need from the system, like anybody else. It's just they're not the same way. So when you say systems are not meant to meet everybody's needs, they're meant for efficiency's sake, like quantity over quality, to meet 80% of the needs or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's those two outliers that really then are vulnerable and need the extra sort of barriers removed.
No cages.
No
No
cages,
laws.
no cages, no, like, treat people how they, like, give them what they need from the system without making them jump to the hoop and go through the hole and, because that's just not going to work for them. So that's why.
Okay, let's move, right? Lesson 8. I tried to make the font fancy, but I guess it's overly done. I guess it's hard to read. Sorry about that. So what do you think? Only by getting can you give. Only by growing in one's spirit. Come on, animals. One can collaborate in the development of others. Agreed? Disagreed? Yeah? Okay. How about these ones?
The same, the one before. The first.
Yeah, the first. And then learn how to admit your mistakes. And the bad teachers blame everyone, everything except themselves. We're talking about lessons for learning. What do you think? How many bad teachers did you meet in life in proportion to good ones? More bad or more good? More good? More good? More bad? Yeah? More good?
More bad.
More bad.
More bad than false.
Okay. Alice?
More good, definitely.
More good. Okay.
Well, like-
So if I say in your life, at the level of secondary education, between say 6 and 18, did you have 5+ good teachers? Yeah? Who had 10+ good teachers? Okay. Who had 3 good teachers but less than 5?
It's somewhat an exception, good teacher, I would say.
It is an exception, yeah?
I mean, everybody has a different.
Yeah, how do you define, Judith? How do you define a good teacher? Because that's the starting point, right?
The ones that I remember is, most of them I don't even
Remember.
can
Okay?
now
Uh-huh.
bring them up and remember. The ones that I remember are
2. Okay. Else?
So I feel like I meet, the most teacher I meet is just like okay teachers. They're not bad, like they didn't do anything wrong, but they're like not really the person you really want to revisit like after you graduate.
Excellent. So people who you don't want to see after you graduate your school are mediocre. They're not really good teachers, right? Those who are really good, you will gladly meet and talk and share. How many of such you have who you want to deal with after, any time in your life after you're done with the class or school?
I said
2.
I have
5.
I have 6.
Oh, that's great.
Somewhere between 6 and 10, I was extremely fortunate.
Okay,
And
okay.
I realized that, and the reason I say they're good is that we knew they loved us.
And how did you know that?
It's a really long time ago. There was something in their eyes, there was something in the way that they we all did better than we thought we could do with them. They believed in us.
Okay, so you don't expect a teacher saying all the time, like in the family, I love you, right? No. It's exactly this,
And
the way
challenged-
they look.
They
yeah.
challenged us, and then they sat back and let us get on with it.
There's a great educator who wrote an article, I wish it were translated into English. It's about different types of teachers. And he's talking about good, mediocre, and very bad. And he brings up character features of real good teachers. And he's debating the idea whether a good teacher should never raise his or her voice, or curse, or use real French, not the French, but a different French.
One of my favorite teachers threw a piece of chalk at a boy.
And you still love that
I love
teacher.
that teacher.
Yeah, so why would you forgive a teacher who would, that's exactly the case which is described in this article. Why would you still appreciate and love this teacher, although it's kind of unacceptable?
Yeah.
Imagine I would start, throwing.
I think we all recognize
Then
that
we talk to
this.
the
Yeah,
We all,
chalk.
yeah, we all recognize that the child was struggling, and I think we all knew also that the teacher loved all of us, even the child that he threw the chalk at, and he was at wit's end, and the child was disrupting the entire class always. And I think they did come to some sort of, I think that's even with like a parent relationship. You can have this conflict, but you need to come back together and resolve it or talk about it, and I think it was, I don't know.
So this educator is talking about one teacher who he considers the writer, considers among the best. And he says this teacher would allow himself shout like crazy, call students idiots. He was a math teacher, and when students would not understand something, he would easily call them dumbheads, idiots, etc. But when the kids understood it, and he's there, and he realizes he's so loving and happy that it happened, that they realized it was so genuine. He really wanted them to get it. So they would forgive cursing, bad behavior, jerk, and anything. By the way, I didn't tell you this, but now that we came to this, remember Sukhomlinsky? I mentioned several times, that's what he did. That's what he did. When children misbehaved, he would throw chalk. And they said he was very good, so it would go straight into the forehead. If the kid didn't manage to jump.
Those teachers are passionate. And I think
That's
that's like, those were the
excellent.
ones
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I went back to visit, the ones
Yeah.
that I still remember the name of my
Yeah.
grade 4 teacher. You don't want to know how long ago that was.
I also remember, yeah.
He was
And
my
they-
grade 4
yeah,
teacher.
yeah.
Yeah, they were passionate. And I say that I've also had teachers who weren't just bad, they were abusive.
Mhm.
And so,
Yeah, yeah. So, going back to the concept of a good teacher, does it really matter whether the teacher is mostly women, let's talk about, does it matter whether she looks really beautiful? No. Does it matter whether she is old or young? No. How long?
everybody's old when you're a child.
How long does it take? Yeah, we're all old, with children, that's true. But a little fewer wrinkles. So how long does it take for children to greet, meet, and be happy with someone who is young, beautiful, attractive, and then recognize something is wrong and stop loving? How long do you think it takes?
Half an hour.
So it happens. it happens, right? So children much smarter than we are, right? Because when we see a pretty face or just real good package, everything looks beautiful, it might take more than half an hour to recognize.
They feel.
No, I'm talking about adults, not
Also
children,
adults,
yeah.
Absolutely. You can keep it forever, like
Yeah.
you never really realize.
So children, here's the proof, children are smarter than we are. Because they go deeper, they can read the emotions, right? Okay,
I just feel very
yeah.
uncomfortable with this discussion about like, if, I think, there's a difference between a teacher being passionate and maybe throwing a piece of chalk now and then to someone calling someone an idiot all the time. I think there's a very fun, there's a
No,
really
Sarah, I
fun
never
line.
said all the time. All the time is definitely not allowed. But when
I
you're...
don't want to
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
that, like a teacher, oh, they're just passionate, and, they put these kids down because they'll praise them. I don't
You don't
agree
buy
with
it.
that.
Okay.
I think like if someone is, a passionate teacher, you can express that in a positive way and create a nurturing and safe environment. I don't think you need to use negative pedagogy to do that, or negative reinforcement. I definitely have had teachers that have, thrown a piece of chalk, and that's okay.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, like I think, like I'm not saying that you have to be perfect all
Oh,
the
it
time.
feels like in
But I
Canada
just
it's a
wanna-
regular thing,
But
yeah.
I just want to say, like, I don't want to leave this discussion excusing teachers' bad behavior because they're passionate. I don't want to leave with that sentiment.
No, Sarah, it's excellent you raised this point. Thank you for that. Any ideas in response?
I also think that some teachers are great for some kids, and some teachers are not great for kids in that same room. So there's like that individuality of the child themselves, because I can think of teachers who I really connected with were horrible teachers, but they were great people, and so it created a sense of like safety when it comes.
Excellent point, excellent. Yeah.
Absolutely, I don't think it's ever okay to like, that the negative attention for some kids, because I work with the outliers,
Yeah.
is the only kind of attention they know and recognize. And so positive attention feels so uncomfortable to them. And I'm not like saying you should give negative attention in any way. I think for each child, the acknowledgement can be different. So even though you may have a very caring teacher who's also a great teacher, for that child, there's a disconnect because whatever reason, maybe there's instability elsewhere or whichever. I think what Korczak would have said is positive regard for every child, regardless, but we are human, and children will recognize that adults are human too. They're not one-dimensional, they're not just the teacher, they're not just...
And they will forgive, but if it's not...
I want to be clear, like, children will forgive, children are resilient, but they are affected by trauma. And those are my patients as well. And sometimes school is the only positive interaction they have with an adult, so it's not excusable to feed into that negative reinforcement. This might be the only opportunity in their entire day where they can have a positive relationship with an adult and then learn that their good efforts will get reinforced positively and not only receive negative attention.
Sarah,
we need to-
I hear you. I think what we're talking about is slightly different. We're talking about here's a child and the teacher is trying all sorts of ways. And the teacher feels so emotional about the subject and the necessity and the disability at the moment that on the teacher's part to actually teach that he or she does it, although the teacher feels shamed by doing it, and the teacher might apologize right away. And we're not saying it's okay, but we're saying that rather than being indifferent, quiet, and not showing emotions, I would rather take a person who has emotions. I mean,
There's two things I'd like to mention. First of all, we are regulated by the TRB, so we have standards,
sure.
and we are not allowed to actually
Yeah,
teach this child. But I would like to go back to what you said, and actually I appreciate what you're saying, because there's a case of one teacher in my school who's passionate and she loves what she does, except that sometimes she doesn't realize it, but she's being abusive in some ways, and then she would be very rewarding, and kids feel very uncomfortable because they don't know where to stand,
Yes.
and it creates a very, very bad feeling for the child, and it's unfair because I feel like the child is being used, and it has consequences because now she's losing students because they don't know how to deal with that person, and they know she's passionate, and they will talk about it, but that doesn't work. Not with children's
I
feelings.
agree, like they need like consistency. So if you're gonna discipline consistently with anticipated consequences, that makes sense within that structure. But if you're passionate one moment and then calling someone an idiot another moment, that is like a very good setup for an abusive relationship where you are inconsistent with your negative and positive, and that is very destructive. Like that's sort of that.
are there any circumstances where this could still not be extremely bad for children? Like what is built within this classroom, and in which situation this will be forgiven or will be understood?
I think name calling is abusive and is never acceptable under any circumstance.
Yes.
And is not, for me, is not passion. This happened probably 30 years ago. I once in a class, and they're young adults, not children, like older teens, young 20s. I got so frustrated with a student who I thought was really talented and was just mucking around that I took a script that I was holding and I threw it across the room, not at him, past him. I mean, even if I'd thrown it at him, I wouldn't have hit him, but I didn't. But I just was so frustrated I did that, and I was so horrified. I still get chills when I remember it. It was one of the worst moments in my life, and I did apologize right away, and it became a moment for everybody to, we talked about frustration, and it went somewhere, but in that moment, it was all about me, and it wasn't really about the student, and like that's for me is what I absolutely believe in, and what is so difficult to do, to stay focused on a child, a student, but name calling is, I don't care. It's like impact is way more important than anything
So
else.
I appreciate that story because I think what happened was like you owned what happened. So it's not about, oh, the child will forgive you. It's like, no, it's up to me to fix that relationship and repair it. And I think that's where the responsibility should be. This shouldn't be a discussion on, oh, the child will forgive you. It's okay if you're passionate. It's like, I understand that I'm human. I'm going to own my mistake because I'm the adult. I am the power in the room.
Yes,
and
Sarah, but we're talking about children, and we're trying to understand how children will be impacted, what is for them, how in situations like this, what's happening. That's what we're trying to do. It's absolutely clearly not allowed. There are certain standards and of course, and regulations. And of course, teachers are not allowed to be rude. I mean, no one discusses that. We're talking about human beings as teachers who, as human beings, have different emotions in life. So what's happening then if they allow themselves these emotions? If we let each teacher out of the school right away because that happened, we won't have enough teachers. So what happens next? That's what we're talking about. We're not talking about, am I right or not? Or how do you perceive
I
it?
think that's what with the story about the chalk that I was trying to say, is that it wasn't okay, but that they came together after. So I think in all relationships, I'm not saying that it was okay, we were all shocked by it, and this child was a child that needed extra love and attention. His father was in jail, like there was lots of issues with this child that were a lot more intense than any of the other children in the room. That child needed more love and more positive attention than probably all of us, the other kids in the room. But they did come together after. And I think in a lot of relationships you have this conflict, but like you did, you came back with that student and you try to repair it and you owned it. And I think that was maybe what you're getting at, is that needs to happen. And I agree, I don't think it's okay.
I just appreciate this discussion because I felt like we were leaving this discussion having just said, oh, like a teacher threw a piece of chalk at someone and they were my favorite teacher ever. Or this person wrote an article about how he was abusive and like called everyone names and oh, by the way, he was just a passionate teacher.
No, Sarah.
Can I just finish my
sure,
thought?
go ahead.
So I felt like that's how we were leaving this discussion without context. So I really appreciate being able to put that context and be like, okay, we actually don't think that that's a good thing, but we understand that people are human and now let's move on.
And I guess that's the risk of like when Dr. Julien talked about not being dispassionate, not being objective. The risk is that if I really love these kids and if I really share my passion, whatever, I'll lose it at some moment. I mean, that's the risk. Because if I'm just always like this, I'm never going to hurt anybody. I also may never impact anybody.
Because love is
Yeah.
passion.
Yeah, and if I'm taking that risk, I have to be prepared to own it. And in theory, I guess, take the risk of losing face, except what we're all saying is that that's the exact opposite happens, right? Only more people in our world need.
Claire.
I think how I see it is that there's some value to connecting with children from an authentic, genuine human place. And I agree that that should be in a safe, healthy way for the child.
Sure.
Is that what we're talking about?
Of course. Yeah. What
That
I
being
think,
real with someone there is value to that.
yeah.
And it's also a risk in some way.
Yeah, well, in nursing, we're taught to not do that. We're taught to be very objective and to
keep a distance.
And the best, like, I would say clinical relationships that I've had is when I said, I'm not going to listen to my textbook, I'm not listening to my nursing supervisors in this situation, and I'm going to do what I feel is right because this is not working. Everything that I've been taught is not working, and I just was a human being, and that was the best thing that I could do. So, but yeah, we're not taught to do that. We're not encouraged to do that, and if, my manager or supervisor found out about something, I would probably get in trouble for that. But I know in that situation, that was the appropriate thing to do. But it's hard because you also, you really can't do that in each circumstance.
And you become very vulnerable.
Yeah.
And the problem with passion and emotions is when you allow yourself emotions, there's a huge spectrum. And as in any family, there are different emotions. It doesn't mean people don't love one another, but they allow themselves different emotions. Is it okay? No. Negative emotions are not okay. Never. But the thing is, if we keep the distance as educators with children or medical professionals with patients, we're losing. We're losing. Because when you sit at the ultrasound, you lay on the ultrasound table, right? And they do ultrasound, the technician. And the technician sits with the face, which is a mask, literally, no emotions. And you suspect you have something bad. And you keep asking the technician, what is, I'm not allowed to tell you, says the technician. But please, at least is it good? I'm not allowed to tell. And that's what you see. The mask, I understand there's a protocol and the person behaves exactly as he or she was taught to behave, right? And then you wait for a week to receive the result, the description. How does that feel? It's totally, no emotions, no nothing. It just, the person does his job and does it 100%. Are you happy with that? No. That's what I'm saying. It's not about negative or positive emotions. It's very difficult in human relations to remain dispassionate. And when we're talking about kids and behavior, we all understand there are no ideal kids. But when the atmosphere in the classroom is trust and respect and love, I think that a teacher can raise his or her voice. I'm not saying idiot, this is not acceptable, clearly. But showing emotions that something was explained 100 times and you don't get it, kids, let's do it again. It's human. If they don't learn that we're all human, we're missing something. And Korczak was human. He allowed himself, by the way, even spanking.
I think it's, part of it is, the one I struggle with the most, same is similar to you, is everyone wants us to be, quote unquote, professional.
Neutral.
No, professional. That's the word they use.
Yeah.
We're professional. As a nurse, we're professionals. As doctors, we're professionals. As teachers, we have to be professional in our dealing. But I find that in some people's definition of professional, they take away the humanity and want to make us all machines because we offer a service and we're part of this, a little bit of a, the customer-client type of relationship where, I'm here to provide a service and that's all I do. I'm not human. I can be replaced with a robot. Is somehow how some people interpret that professionalism. And so I find sometimes that professionalism does build barriers that inhibit good delivery of what you're supposed to do, whether you're medical or educational. Like even in our end of year staff meeting in a high school, we were trying to look at our staff handbook and just see what we needed to change. And one teacher was just like, no, we have to be professional. We should never give our cell phones out to kids, ever. They should never have it. And part of me, as part of running a lot of clubs, being with a lot of teams, I'm like, well, I get that because in her perspective, it was, we need to protect ourselves, right? We need to protect ourselves, we need to protect ourselves as teachers. But I think being in a human service profession, not being
Which is
so,
called helping
Yeah.
professions,
Yeah.
by the way.
it's like being so risk averse, being so protective really inhibits what you're meant to do. I grew up in the Philippines. Our teachers were a lot more personable and a lot more personal. They were professionals, but we've been called a class of idiots one time because we deserved it. There was something that happened, and it was like, you're like, I remember being called the first grade idiot in front of all the other idiots, but we needed it at that
At
point.
least you were graded the best.
Yeah, I was. But part of me is like, no, that being called an idiot at that moment, we had a relationship, we had context. And for me, I accepted it as a rebuke, not because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm an idiot. Or like, I don't think it brought down our self-image or self-worth. But it was a very
Cold shower.
efficient, effective, like reality check on us. And we understood where the teacher was coming from. We had that relationship. But sometimes with the professionalism, you do lose that relationship. So that when a teacher does call you like an idiot or something, because, I don't know, not that I call my kids idiot all the time. I do it in kind of like as a teacher, with high schoolers, I do it as a sort of a joke sometimes. Like I call myself an idiot in front of them. Like, when they do something like a little bit idiotic there, but but we have that relationship already set. This is not the most professional. And if you were to take it again out of context, it would look like it was super like bad, but unacceptable. But with that context, it's I don't know, that's the thing that I struggle with the most, is people tell me, well, you have to be professional, you have to be this, you have to be that. But at the same time, I find that takes out the humanity of the relationship. And it's true, I forgot who said it either, one of you ladies said it, that, I could be a great teacher to one, I think it was Rana who said it, I could be a great teacher to one person and be the worst teacher for another, and that is totally true, right? And again, me as the adult knowing that, having that context, I take my risk, but I also take my responsibilities, right? There are the responsibilities like you guys shown, like, you threw the chalk, it was wrong, you threw something, it was wrong, you own up. And I think it's just part of humanity, not even just being an adult. Like even when kids do it, they should be taking the responsibility, and maybe no one has modeled that enough for them to take that responsibility. Instead, they're all like, well, it's not my fault.
Okay.
You were being an idiot. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you guys are saying.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to say, I'm not trying to say like put up professional boundaries. I'm trying to say
Oh,
like.
and I wasn't implying that you were
No,
going
I
against.
didn't think you were, but I just like, what I don't want to leave is like, oh, the children are forgiving and they will always forgive you. It's like, no, we're the adults, we have the power here, we have to self-regulate our emotions. Negative emotions are okay, everybody feels them. We've developed to have those emotions, and that's totally fine. But if you cross that boundary, if you have a good intention behind it, if it's in service of the person that you're helping and it's not for you, like some people cross boundaries in service of that youth, but some people cross boundaries because they need that support. That's wrong. But if they're crossing that boundary in service of that youth, I think that's totally fine, but you own it. You own that, and I don't think it's up to that child or that youth to forgive you. Like, that capacity is not unlimited, and
Yeah.
they will be affected by trauma. And that's all I wanted to say, is that don't think that they are an all existing like rubber band that will never stop. Like, they will be affected by trauma. That's all I wanted to say. And
No, Sarah, we don't keep you as devil's advocate for sure. No, and it was actually good to bring for the discussion, definitely. And of course, the teacher I was talking about in that article, he's describing, of course it's not happening all the time. And of course the teacher apologized afterwards. But why kids forgive? Because the intent is to help them. And that's about humanity. It's about our profession, which is full of emotions. And ideally, it would be great if teachers do not allow themselves. It would be great, but if to be realistic, it happens. It's not forgivable, but what is even more unforgivable for me is when teachers are absolutely indifferent. Come to work, as you say, as robots, do what they're supposed to do, give a lesson, leave. Whatever kids get or not get, they work as cold professionals. I guess probably the key word for me is cold. And kids feel it right away. That is the barrier which happens immediately. Okay, let's move on. Observations.
We didn't deal with the questions. Want to go to the previous slide?
I thought, no?
Yes.
Oh, no, we didn't, sorry. Yeah,
It's so great.
yeah. The question is much more important than the answer. don't remember who said this, but somebody very smart said that whenever he presents, he expects a good question. And when there's a good question, that makes a difference. If there's no good question, this is it. When kids ask questions, remember I told you about that bad teacher who, whenever the kid would raise their hand, like, here's the corner, go. So when the teacher does not welcome a question, that's a sign, right away, right there, bad teacher. Because questions of kids, it's a symptom of many, many things. What would you say what? Curiosity, what else?
Critical thinking.
Interest.
Engagement.
Attention, yeah, at least listen to me, yeah, as a teacher.
Clarification.
Yeah, clarification. And if the kid stands up and says, you know what, it's all wrong what you said, let me tell you, how would you react?
I was that kid.
Can you explain?
You were this.
Oh, I was that kid.
So how did it happen?
How did teachers react to me? Well, that's when I got a shoe thrown at me once.
Okay.
But also, it really depended on.
Was it a nice shoe or just?
No, that's what really, my parents then took me out of school.
Okay.
But it really, it depended on the teacher and it depended on the situation. Like,
How did you feel as a child asking questions?
very defiant. And part of my asking questions was to be provocative,
Oh,
to
okay.
purposely
Okay.
be provocative.
A revolutionary in the class.
I mean, attention seeker.
Okay.
People can label it in different ways and it probably every
No,
day to
how
day
did
had
you
different ways.
feel?
There were days where I felt like it was absolutely because I knew other people had the same question
Oh, and no one
and
did?
nobody was asking. Or there were some days where it was like, I totally disagree with you and I'm gonna ask a question that indicates I disagree with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had children ask me questions when they disagree with me, and then I just listen to them, and I'm like, yeah, that's wrong. And you're 4 years old, and you know that this is not a dinosaur, or something like that. Like,
Yeah.
I think you just have to listen.
And they love explaining.
Yeah.
They love it when adults say, you know,
What do you think?
yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
But at the same time, you
Yeah.
can also learn that there's different perspective and there's no right or wrong, but different ways of thinking for some answers. So you can take them, okay, can you explain me why you think that's
Sure,
wrong?
sure, of course.
And then you give me your answer and somebody else will give another answer and then that's discussion.
For sure.
Okay.
I truly thought I had better ideas.
I think it's one of the most important life skills that we all need to learn.
Asking questions.
And if you are lucky enough to be with somebody who seriously answers your question or asks you more questions or is excited that you're asking questions, then you go into life expecting that it's okay to ask questions. And if they get shut down early enough, I know so many adults who just are terrified to ask questions. And that's really, that's not good for us, it's not healthy.
I think somebody told me once, don't ask a question if you don't know what the answer is going to be. And I was just like, what? Yeah, like, it seems totally counterintuitive, but it's almost like a politician kind of response, right? Like, don't ask a question unless you know what you want the response to be. And I was like,
Then
what's the
why
whole point of
ask?
asking a question?
Well, that's what I found, like, in graduate school, a lot of times people don't want to ask questions because it makes them look stupid.
Yeah.
And I'm always that person that's asking questions, and I don't care if I look stupid, because, like, that's just,
What's the definition of stupid?
well, but I think that's what people learn growing up, is that if they ask questions, that means that they don't know, which means then that they're stupid. But for me, I've just always been really curious, or who knows why, but for me, and like, it continued into my adult life, that I continued to ask questions. But but even still in graduate school, I know that sometimes it has made me look stupid in front of my peers, but,
As opposed to curious.
yeah, and I'm just like, okay, well, you can think I'm stupid, and I'm gonna just continue to
Did
go.
someone call you stupid, or you just?
I have felt stupid a lot in my graduate studies, yeah. My master's degree and my doctoral degree. But I think like I'm confident enough to be like, I don't think I'm the smartest person in the room, ever. That's never my like, and I don't care to be the smartest person in the room. I care to think critically about things and so that's where I come from. To kind of,
One of the best teachers I ever had was the person who said there's no such thing as a stupid question. And who said the exact opposite of what you said. Only ask the questions that you don't know the answer to. And that was such a liberation. And I was an adult already before somebody said it.
Okay,
So this-
teacher's observations. What do you think? What do you think?
I think there should be more than one teacher in a room. That way you can always, because being a teacher is actually, it can be isolating because you have your own little kingdom, right? You have your classroom, and depending on what your school environment is and your school culture is, you can be, you can live in that little kingdom by yourself for the next
Does it also develop kind of feeling that you have more and more power? Like with years of being a teacher? And that's scary, that's kind of dangerous, because if you develop this in yourself, yeah?
Well, it's like continuing education for any profession. We always learn more as time passes and gather more knowledge, so, I mean, I can think of doctors who need to go back to school and judges.
Yeah,
This speaks to like collaboration to me, like just from a medical perspective, just how collaborative practice, and not just within like interdisciplinary like medical professions, but with community members, with schools, with ECE, with everyone, basically enriches the care that we can offer to our patients, to our kids, to our families, and to our communities in terms of development.
I'm sure you are aware of Finnish school system, which is one of the best in the world. Are you? No? So in Finland, because of the PISA, results of tests and everything, so there are many research-based papers and books written about Finland and about the Finnish school system by people who are inside and people who are outside. And one of the features which they have, that's why I started talking about it, teachers are working within the school building on a very collaborative level. So when this, like something happened during the class, the kid didn't understand or misbehaved, the teacher brings it to the teacher's room openly, and then teachers who work with the same class, with the same group of kids, they get together, they discuss as a group, and they get an answer easier. Plus, no one hides, no one keeps it to oneself, because this could be really dangerous. If I have a problem with this kid, I'll solve it myself, but maybe something bigger than just within this class. And there's one more thing which I couldn't digest for quite a while. Special education, and all of you who are teachers and non-teachers know what it is, right? When kids have any kinds of mental or physical disabilities, then special education. And hardly any parent would love a child being called a child with special needs or working with special because it's kind of, in a way, a label. So what's happening in Finland, they consider, in theory and practice, that every kid needs to go through a short program of special education at some point during the secondary education period, because no one is within the norm, and medical professionals will know it better, right? There's nothing like absolute norm. It doesn't exist in the world. It's a theoretical construct.
They try.
But it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'll finish in a second. So what they do, at some point, they bring this or that student in the class, in the school building, to a special ed program for a couple of months or half a year or shorter or longer, and then put this kid back into the regular class. And they consider it's a huge benefit for every child. It's not considered kind of negative. Yeah, me.
Actually, because we talked a lot about that in my school, and we know that kids who are special needs don't want to be labeled special needs, and they don't want to be different from the others. So what the special ed teachers said, if we can be flexible, we should be flexible with everybody, so everybody can benefit from the flexibility, instead of just saying, this is just for that child. So if it's not hurting the outcome of the curriculum, why not be flexible with everybody?
Okay. I hate rushing you, but we still have a movie. The purpose of research should not serve any interest except that of the child, who should be treated as a unique human being. There's nothing to discuss.
Nothing about us without.
All in agreement, yeah. And here's about doctors and teachers, which I love because I think these are two professions which should always be together for the physical and emotional health of children and overall health. Yeah?
Last post.
Yeah, the last.
Yeah.
And to add to this last part, I was recently at a lecture with a guy from Nigeria, and he mentioned the statistics that killed me. He said every day in Nigeria, 200 women give birth without any support under a tree. Literally having seizures in their mind. So, how many of them die? How many babies don't live until the first month? 200 women. So, and this is happening in 2019. And what Sam was talking about yesterday, the guy from Rwanda, remember? When I asked him about his message, yeah, you guys are lucky. And that is always in perspective, always in comparison. That was very helpful for me, frankly.
It's
Okay.
okay that he was like lucky in many ways too.
Yeah,
The
of
fact
course.
that from the genocide to then being in a community where those racial stereotypes
And a family spirit.
yeah,
Which was
could
great.
overcome.
Yeah.
Like I still am trying to understand how that can happen within a decade after such atrocity. How does that? Because we're not seeing that in Canada. You know, we're continuing to see racism and discrimination, and so how's that happened? And he just said, well, the government's really supporting that. Well,
Yeah.
how? To me, I'm just like, I just want to talk to him more about that. Like how? And I guess I'm just kind of in disbelief. Like how?
You know, the explanation for me comes from a difference in culture. It's a very community-oriented culture, and women who are used to having big families and who lost all their children, they are deprived of the most sacred thing, love of the mother, and they're ready, happily ready to give it to other kids. And because of it, this love is unconditional, without boundaries, and because of it, even with 16 children, and I'm sure not many funds available, and I'm sure the conditions are not really good, but they still create this atmosphere of love and safety.
But you would
You're
think
talking
that,
about tribalism, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
like within
yeah.
16
Yeah.
kids, if you recognize your child in another child, then would you not,
I
do you know
don't,
what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like
of course,
how,
of
to
course,
me, that is
yeah.
such an amazing, like,
It is,
I wanna
it
hear
is.
more about that. Like how has
Yeah.
that,
I
Yeah.
wonder how long that period of maybe being.
He was talking about 10 years.
He was-
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was
I
born a
wonder
year
if,
after the
like,
genocide.
20 years from now, if people will forget all the atrocities.
but how can you forget,
No,
Like,
no, you
we're
can't
still
forget.
talking
No,
about the
no, of
Holocaust.
course.
It's
No,
still-
no, absolutely not. You can't forget, no. But
Next generation, they are not really.
I don't think they can forget. Plus, each family has somebody or many somebodies who are gone because of that. I don't think it's possible to forget. But I also think that, I don't know much about Rwanda, I'm speculating. I'm just thinking that maybe the government is making every effort to like move on because it's, again, it's in the human nature to move on and just build on whatever foundation is there, you know?
There's a lot of evidence to show, like, just moving on without reconciliation doesn't work. If you look at, racial tensions in the United States, people think, oh, civil rights movement happened, let's just move on, and that obviously doesn't.
No, we're talking about Rwanda genocide. We had a student yesterday who was talking. He's from Rwanda.
He did talk about the reconciliation, like that was the cornerstone of government policy, but I'm just wondering, like, how does that actually actualize?
Yeah.
Like, how are they doing that, and then how is that affecting, so he was in this home, and they had all the different, they call them tribal groups, and they were like brothers and sisters, and they were treated with respect and love, and all these like, colonial imposed, I don't know if you want to call them stereotypes or whatever, that helped sort of create the genocide, where then sort of he seemed to not be there. And I just, to me, I'm like, how do, I want to hear more about that. To me, that's amazing, if that's true.
I mean,
Yeah, because I've had students from Rwanda in my schools, and we had talked about to them about that. And one of the things about the reconciliation, they took the way they did it in South Africa after the apartheid, where people would tell their story and without judgment. So whether you were a perpetrator or a victim, it didn't matter. You had to tell your story. And they used a bit of that aspect of healing somehow. But the notion of family, for example, a lot of students came without their parents, but they lived within the family. There was somebody, so an aunt or an uncle or even a friend that became mother and father. And the community, the family is very strong. And many students they call each other brothers, sisters, but actually they are not by blood. But for them, they are brothers and sisters. And they have one mother and one father, or two mothers, two fathers. And that's how they rebuild themselves.
so the community becomes this foundation on which they recreate themselves. But you are totally right, it's extremely difficult. And in South Africa, of course, Mandela was the one who said, let's forgive, right? So it came from the person who was such a champion of peace, who was so much respected by everyone. I don't know about Rwanda government.
Well, Rwanda, the thing is, Romeo Dallaire was the only one actually in Canada who did something, and he actually told the people from Rwanda, he said, Canada doesn't care, and that's true, Canada didn't care. They didn't do much for them. And students actually told me that they fled at night by foot. They left the country by foot to go to a camp because they did not know where their parents were. They were arrested and they had no idea. So it was just horrible what happened. But I feel that the whole Africa was colonized. Only 2 countries were never colonized. Everything was colonized. So in these countries, family is very strong. I know that in Algeria, where my parents are from, family, like when there's a wedding, when there's a death, everybody gathers, everybody's around. Like it's very strong, not like in Western culture where everybody's me and myself. Yeah.
I think it also, there's a piece around the demographic sort of composition of a particular community as well. Like Sweden is used to be very homogeneous in ethnic background as well as sort of religious background. So the more homogeneous, the more commonality there is, the less diversity, and then the less conflict. So they were able to push through really progressive laws because people generally agreed that that was what they wanted for their community. Canada, as a very multicultural and diverse place, then has to balance out different values and different priorities of different groups. So there's a lot more to consider, and so there's less of a, we're going to solve it this way. Because if you pick one way of doing it, there's still those 20, 30, whatever outliers that don't and are still not having that reconciliation for them. So I don't think that's the one answer, but I think it does, because I used to think about these things too, like how does this society or community able to do this so successfully, or Japan, or and it really does have something to do with the composition of the community, and the more commonality they have, the less, not that it's better, I don't think that diversity brings a lot of benefits to it. In no way am I saying it's better, it's just I think a simpler or maybe faster way of doing something. I mean, just thoughts as we're talking about.
Yeah, there's a concept which is called the principle in education, which is called culture adaptation. And whenever we bring, and we tend doing it all the time, everywhere in the world, we bring innovations like they work in Finland or they work in Singapore, and we bring them to a totally different system. And we're surprised it doesn't work, because it won't. Because you need cultural adaptation. Remember we were talking yesterday about authorial schools, and we were talking about cultural translation. That's what it means. You need to translate into this culture, and it could be that this particular culture will not accept it. And you can't do something which works great in another culture. Like Starbucks, invented in Seattle, is considered like best coffee. Everyone is crazy about Starbucks. And when my French friends come visit with us, they say, that brown water, you call it coffee?
Yeah.
Really?
Actually, I don't like Starbucks.
I don't either, but
Italians don't like me, they're very
So that's what I'm saying. That's a simplified example of cultural adaptation of everything, practically. Okay, we're almost there. I wanted you to read it one more time because it's so important, and it's kind of a conclusion for any profession. We cannot become specialists overnight, and I can tell you from many, many nights of my professional life, you cannot become a professional with many, many nights thinking about it. It's a never-ending process. You always learn. You always learn. And I'm really very, very appreciative to each and everyone that you raised all your questions, and we had all these conversations during these 2 weeks, which enriched me tremendously. What's your overall impression first of the book, When I'm Little Again? Yeah.
I went back to my childhood, and as I was reading, I was thinking of a time, because I grew up very poor, and we had 10 kids, and and we had only like 2 bedrooms for all the 10 kids and parents, and 1 big kitchen. We had no bathroom indoor, and no hot water. And so we didn't have many toys, so I used to play with my color pencils, and they were my people. And so some were girls, some were men, and that's how I played, and I played teacher. And that's, so I like all that
So it
creativity.
was a calling for sure
Yeah.
from early on, yeah?
The feelings of a child and the way he looks at the world is sounds very familiar, kind of. Not the way he criticizes the adults because of the way the book is built as being a child again, so he knows how adults are. So it's a mix of his own feelings as a child, but also criticizing the adults, and understanding, not just criticizing, also understanding how they came to be the way they are.
What I wanted to ask you, the richness of emotions, the wealth of emotions which he shows in this book, which children possess. Can you relate to your own childhood? Do you remember big dramas and huge emotional, sensational situations when you were overwhelmed with emotions at an early age when adults would never suspect? Yeah?
I just, what I appreciated was, and I finished it when I at the end, is that he keeps peeling back the layers of what's going on underneath.
That's
The
excellent.
surface
That's a
is-
great
and the surface
metaphor,
is
yeah.
something that the parents said, and that, you know, and then I loved when he says, well, of course, I was an adult, so, you know, the way that he keeps turning it on its head, I found, it was very moving, it was profoundly moving, and a really good reminder. But again, it's all about slowing down. It's all, when you really slow down.
And life happens and huge emotions. Did you ever have like serious love and love problems when you were 7 or 8 or earlier, and like these triangular things and like tragedies connected with love as a child?
I don't know if I would, yeah, love. It's sometimes an item or like, it was so, I was a bit of a control freak. And there was like favorite dress-up tiara or something at daycare, preschool. And I hid it because I didn't want any other child to touch it or take it. I wanted to know where it was at all times. But it was so intense of like, that I would hide it. And I would purposely like, make sure nobody, just weird, weird things. But it was a sense of needing that control. And for that attachment to the object to be honored.
And how about to a subject, to a human being?
Sibling, yeah, I was a bit of a...
No, I don't mean siblings. I mean loving a boy when you are very young, but feeling like it's real female drama. Did you have big loves when you were little?
Not for
Really?
the opposite
No?
sex. No, like,
I liked Corey Hart and Pavel Bure.
Okay.
I never had, I think I
No,
had a picture of a shaved Rivera on my wall. I definitely had that.
I had a classmate, I was 8, and to this day, I remember it so clearly. We all felt he was a very handsome boy, so imagine the class, boys boys and girls, and here's a boy who was 8, as all of us, and each girl in the classroom was in love with him, like each girl in the class. And he was so democratic that it's quite a story. And what is most striking, it's true, and I remember it to this day. So he announced to us girls, so for us, not to really fight, he would fall in love with each of us, and he had literally a schedule. Seriously. He had a schedule, so each week on Monday in the morning, believe me or not, so before classes, we would come earlier, and my parents could not understand why on Mondays I so badly needed to be in school earlier than usual. So we would all come, and no one questioned, you know. And he would announce, like, today I announce that for this week I'm in love with Maria, for example. And Maria would become, you know, for a week the queen of, but all other girls were so damn jealous. It was unbelievable. Like, and each of them would forget that there would be another week possible. So all other boys in the class were like no one's. But this guy was the epicenter. And what was happening, so he would walk home with this Maria, so it's not like he was walking her home. No, Maria was walking him home. It was a privilege. It was a privilege. And as minimum as 2 or 3 or more girls will follow behind.
Happened to this boy.
I know, I will tell you what happened.
Administrator.
Yeah. So, and a few girls will follow, okay? And then roles will change, and it was like this. And there were some girls who were really possessive, and they really wanted his interest and his love. And just think of this, that is 8-year-old girls, yeah? Not like 8-year-old. So once we came into the classroom, like 3rd class during the day, and two of them, this boy and the girl, who was not the one chosen for this week, were not in the classroom. Like 3 minutes late, 5 minutes late, the teacher became really nervous, so the teacher left us and went outside to search in the corridor. No one. She went upstairs, no one, and we were crawling behind her. Everyone wanted to know what was happening, right? So there was like, you know, like attic, like no one was there, like the floor, which is before the roof, right? So here's the scene. He's on the floor, and he was a big boy. And the girl who was on him, hitting him horribly, she was like 3 times skinnier and smaller. And while she was hitting him all over, she was shouting, "That's for Maria, that's for Irina, that's for Helen, and that is for me." And just think of this, the level of, on the one hand, physical abuse and ability of this little girl who was so much smaller and definitely less physically fit than the boy, to actually put him on the floor. And by the way, that was the time after which this whole thing with the schedule and falling in love stopped. Yeah. So she had quite some consequences after that, but he actually got such respect that for the next 3 years, she was the one, the chosen. But what I'm talking about, I think we tend to forget that children at any age are able for such strong emotions, and they live so fully that adults would never really recognize. And if not for that beating, hitting, and many consequences coming afterwards, no one would really know. It was all under, the tablecloth, and only all of us knew, and we all kept it among ourselves. So I'm surprised no one remembers that you were in love when you were little, no?
Not that I mean, I had strong emotions, usually they
Yeah.
were anger.
Not love.
I stormed home one day and told my mother, like, nap time at daycare is the wrong time. They don't let us do this, they don't let us do that, had all these criticisms. She came to me to school with, or preschool with me the next day because she was like, she was quite worried why I was so irate and angry.
Yeah.
That was fine, and it was basically, somebody I felt had slighted me somehow, I don't know. And she was like, but you had a good point, like, why did they have nap time before lunch and not after lunch? Like, you were raising good points, so it was hard to argue with you, but I would get very indignant, like, very indignant very quickly. And I'm not, like, nobody else in my family is, like, reactive or, but I had strong
You
emotions.
sure you are there, daughter, yeah?
I have adopted siblings, so I might be.
No, I'm kidding, of course.
But yeah, no, I think there's intense emotion.
In children, for sure.
Oh, yeah, for sure, like, and sometimes it's more recognizable because they don't use words, they act it out instead of,
There
Yeah.
is this paragraph in the book where it said, children are like spring, it's either sunny and shining, or either it's a storm, but for the adults, they are they are in a fog, where they just, things develop, and so I found that observation really.
Yeah, from the book, yeah.
I just thought of something right now that, I mean, yeah, I can remember being in love with all sorts of people when I was in school, teachers and other kids. And I remember my daughter, even when she was in daycare.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And what I just thought of is that adults always they never said you love them or you're in love. They just said they were precious.
Really?
And we called it, oh, I have a crush on somebody, which devalues it. As if, as a child, you're not capable of having the emotion. At least that's my feeling. I mean, I've never thought of it until just now.
No, I think it's your interpretation because the language used among children is love.
Yeah, but I'm saying that
Oh, the adults, yeah,
call it
interpreting
that,
it,
and
yeah.
so then as a child you take it on, because I can remember when I was maybe a little bit older, we'd say, oh, I have a, you wouldn't, and it's sad. The other thing is an observation that I think now in retrospect is Korczakian, that my husband made of our daughter when she was little, and, I don't know, 5 or so, volcanic emotions. And like you're saying, when it's over, it's gone and it changes. And he said that children have exactly the same emotions that adults do. People have emotions. The difficulty is that their body mass is so much smaller that they can't absorb it the way we can as adults, and so it just has to overflow in all directions.
Interesting, yeah.
Which I've always, whether or not that is actually true scientifically, I have no clue, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
That makes
that's
sense.
really interesting. Claire?
I remember when I was a child and I had a pet rabbit named Spring, and my dad had built like an outdoor structure for the rabbit cage, and I would feed it every day, and I really loved my pets, and I felt everything deeply and still do so. And one day I went out to feed my rabbit and it was gone, and the door was open. And my dad came out, and I just, like, he said, "I think your rabbit's gone." And I just burst out crying, immediately had this response, and he said, I remember him saying, what I liked about that was just your emotion, your raw emotion, and that you just expressed yourself. And like, I remember my dad saying this to me when I was a little kid, and that was so validating, and that he appreciated that and valued that. And as a child, that gave me, it was just such a gift from a parent to just be present with you in your pain, your sorrow.
So think of Korczak, who because he was a real human being, not because he was a medical professional, but because he was a real human being. When a child would misbehave, he would put a hand on the forehead, touch it, like in the family, yeah? Are you running a fever? So what teacher would allow herself or himself do this? None. None. And the child is bursting into emotions or saying something bad or misbehaving, and the first reaction from Korczak is putting a hand on the forehead. Is the forehead hot? Are you running a fever?
How are you feeling?
Yeah. So it's like immediately, you know, like when two people are standing, it's immediately standing on the side of the child. Not keeping the distance, not just coming closer, but just reversing. And that's a very different perspective.
I don't know if all children are this more emotional, or I don't necessarily.
No, of course not.
Like-
Not all children, no.
Yeah, because when I was a kid, my parents, they took me to this farm, and there was these runs. There was 2 runs, these piglets, and they were going to die, and so my parents allowed me to take them home, and I would feed them their leftover food, and I would feed them a bottle, and I would read them stories at night. But I knew that we had a small backyard, and that eventually they would get too big. And one day they were gone because it got too big. And I just, I didn't cry. I knew that I would not be able to, read them stories again and all this kind of stuff, but I just sort of accepted it.
How old were you?
I was kindergarten, grade 1. And then
That's interesting, telling stories that, I've never heard that.
I would read them stories.
Yeah.
And then when I was in grade 4, we had a bunny, and we had 2 bunnies, and one of them we didn't really take that great of care of. We weren't that interested in that bunny. And one of our neighbors, they were a refugee family, and my parents gave them this bunny, knowing that they would eat the bunny. And I also knew that. And I also didn't get upset. So I don't know how,
This connection happens.
why was I okay with that? Like that, I know I've told other people that story, and they're like, that is horrible that your family did that to your bunny. But I'm like, well, I wasn't really playing with it anymore. And I knew that they needed food, and they were poor, and that's how so I was able to rationalize it. So I think sometimes we say that children are emotional, but I don't think all children express themselves that way, or that they can't rationalize things. Or
No, I think it takes waves, like you get a pet and you get so attached, and there's a certain period when this pet is like the center of your life, and then something else happens, another pet or something else, like different situations in your life, different friendships or somebody else, and then the pet is forgotten. Have you been in situations like you got a pet, you are overly this pet, you are feeding this pet, and then sometime later you overgrew?
So maybe my parents were kind of aware and like
Yeah,
waiting for the right time to be
Yeah.
like,
To
the
take-
pigs are growing out of your
Yeah.
little
To
play
take them
for
away,
thing.
yeah.
I find adolescents like 11 to sort of like 15 way more emotionally labile than the younger, like child, like under 5. And I mean, part of that is hormones and puberty and all this other stuff, but I remember being way more emotionally impacted by things in my adolescence, or like 11 to 15, 16. Like, I can say I was in love. I was absolutely in love with this boy, to the point I've never felt that way about somebody else. But it's a completely different context, because I was like 14. And it was like, you didn't think about actual life and going through that. So I was way more emotionally labile and intense as an adolescent than I was as a child. And I think partly that struggle around having control over the outcome of my life I was more aware of it and more seeking it out as an adolescent than as a child.
I want to bring you back to Korczak. And clearly the situation was so different, so grave, yeah, and the situation around political situation, social situation between wars, then the war. Does it give us reasons to say we cannot really accept anything or much from his practice, from his approach to children? Does it allow us to say, well, yeah, he was a hero, he did what he did, but that was a very different life, different culture as well? What do you think?
Just the last, maybe last year or 2 of his life, he was 15, how old was he?
64 or something?
When he died, actually 64.
So he had a long life before that, and most of his writings and his
But he
pedagogy-
went through 4 wars during his lifetime, starting from the beginning of the century, which means he was at the time 25, 26.
But in between the 2 wars, that was for many European countries the best time of
They entered the
acceptance for
1920s.
Jews,
Yeah.
and many great scientists and grew up in that time and actually graduated from universities, and they became today, I mean, they are not there anymore, but Einstein and so many in Europe and in the US. So he was the child of that period between those 2 wars, and his theory and his way of looking on a child and was maybe unique even, although there were different trends of education. But his body of work is really amazing. So we cannot dismiss it as
Okay.
I think we talked about this yesterday, and I'm just gonna say it again, I think the spirit of him is the thing that I'm gonna keep with me, but I don't think, there's lots of things that I don't necessarily agree with his approach. And I think we've learned, I think in everything we need to learn and grow, and adapt to our context, and so there's things that I will cherish from his teaching.
Like what?
And I'm not.
And that's a question to everyone.
I would say really acknowledging the child first. Like how I was taught was to really embrace the family and then the child. And so I've been doing that my whole, but as a parent recently, I really love those clinicians that treated my son when he was a scrawny little jaundiced baby when they acknowledged him, they didn't treat him like a little ugly newborn that he really was at the time. He's not that cute.
Only the mother can see.
Exactly, but I could tell others were thinking that. But yeah, from that experience, I've like really valued the clinicians that were like, your baby is beautiful, when I was not feeling that at the time. And so now I would approach that differently. But hearing like from Dr. Julian and then also Korczak, I feel like that's actually a very honoring thing. And I think before that, like I would say, well, does this work in all cultures? I think that could be insulting for some parents to not acknowledge them, and so I don't know if that can, maybe the other clinicians have any thoughts on how that, or even with youth, like definitely to acknowledge the youth first. But yeah, it's something that I'm thinking about, and yeah.
Okay. I mean,
From what I'm thinking is like the honoring the child and be at their level physically and also listening and not dismissing them. And I think I'm going to be to learn to be patient and learn from them, exchange. But it's more like in my relationship with kids. I love children. I don't have any, but I love children. And sometimes I hear you and talking about your kids, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should have had a child. But it's just, I know I will always be around children, and I think I will keep on being around children because that's how that's what brings me life.
Sarah, do you want to say something? Or
I guess it's a bit harder for me. I didn't have the privilege of being with you guys for the whole course, and I really did appreciate the sort of intersectoral conversations you were able to have. I know that I could definitely not do my work without educators and other interprofessionals being as part of the team, so I really appreciate that. Absolutely trying to acknowledge, I think even like acknowledging that what the child, or for me and my work is mostly youth, that what they have to say is just as important as what I have to say in and of itself is an intervention a lot of the time. And that's where I see a lot of the green circle of the child brings in like infrastructural changes that can happen for the youth, but I think even just saying that your voice is the most important in the room can be really, really helpful, just in that acknowledgement.
thank you, Alice.
Yeah, so I feel like the thing I'm going to take from this course is that Korczak really respects children as a person. And then he said that they are not the person of tomorrow, they are the person of today. So that's really, really important. Because in my work, I see lots of parents, they want to arrange for their kids and they want to arrange everything for the good of the child. But actually, what's the real good thing about the child? Like what's for their own good? It's not for us to decide, it's for the child to decide. So respect the child and then really acknowledge their own choice. That's really important.
Thank you. Sigrid?
I think what I've kind of taken from this one is that children do need, let me rephrase that too. Adults need to have someone interpret the child for them. Just because the one place that I keep coming back to when I think about this is just in our school anyways is discipline, and really how much do I think I can confidently say that with a lot of frontline educators, we kind of were there, so we kind of understand
children a little bit more, but then when they escalate into administration who have not been in classrooms for a while, and then they just want the problem solved rather than to hear the child, or they want to support their staff or support the parents, but not necessarily kind of hear what the child has to say. So that's where I've kind of like that's been kind of resonating for me in this entire time. That sometimes, especially like we all work, well, most of us work with children frontline, so it kind of feels like, you know, yeah, this is so like
Makes sense.
it makes sense. But then when you have people who haven't worked with children for a while, they tend to forget, and we need to build it into our structures to have that, no, you gotta, they're human beings too. Like if anything, to just like reiterate that fact that just because they're children doesn't mean they're any less. So we gotta give them the same kind of respect as we do to every human being, and give a chance for them to authentically voice what they have to say. And in order to do that, we have to be authentic in our listening as well.
That's wonderful, and it brings me back to this, my favorite concept of children are foreigners, but this, as a linguist in my first degree, that makes it synchronic translation, both ways. What you were talking about, you need two interpreters, two guides, one for children, for the world of adults, and for adults into the world of children. So you practically need two professionals. But if a teacher becomes this interpreter for both worlds, then he or she is the best teacher. If this person speaks both languages and speaks them fluently, if you wish, as a native speaker, you know what I mean? If you speak the language of children and the language of adults as an educator fluently and can interpret both ways, because usually synchronic interpreters work only one way, right? You got it, right? Because metaphorically, it's great. It can kind of go on with the idea which Korczak put. Then the educator who can work both ways as an interpreter for both worlds, then it works. And the same about medical professionals, don't you think? That if you can interpret both ways. Yeah, absolutely. Judith?
I was thinking about two levels of maybe the institutional, the rights of the children, and the way to involve them in our everyday decision making. It's nowhere. It's something really novel, and we had last week this very nice.
Jonathan?
And the kids.
Human Rights
Yeah.
Library.
Yeah. That for me it was a little bit, because I'm not in any one of these professions, I was really surprised of the way the kids can be in the level of adults by making decisions. On the personal level, I would like to be more patient with kids, not to tell them what to do whenever my grandkids do some things, and I tend to show them how to do this or what to do, or so be more less protective and more patient with my time and with the things they are doing, and not intervene and make them do it. I think it's supposed to be done. So,
Thank you. Glenn?
Yeah, I think everything everyone said has spoke to me in terms of, really honoring the child as a person in that moment, being respectful, how to let go of maybe my own agenda and really be present, connect, and listen in a way that you're getting that child's message.
And disconnect with your own agenda. Yeah. Connect
Yes.
with the child and disconnect with what keeps us,
Even what Sheila was talking about in terms of, we have these assessments and evaluations that we do as part of a, pediatric assessment or, a developmental
Same in
pediatric
schools.
assessment. And how he says, that doesn't work in terms of connecting with a child and really being intuitive. And that's the part, that's the art of connecting, and every clinician will do that differently because that interaction will be different. And how to find sort of, I guess, like my own approach with kids in order to do that, and then still, be able to do my job as well. So yeah, lots to think about and still grow, but a really beautiful foundation and approach.
Okay, thank you. Jane?
I think the only thing that I could add at this point is just a reminder not to generalize, but to be really specific and be present with this, with whoever I'm with. Because I think, actually, from what I know, he was wonderful with children. He was not so hot shit with adults. He couldn't handle them.
Exactly.
My mom, I can remember my mom talking about how devastated she and her sisters were because he would come to the house to be with my grandparents. He would always go first into the living room to be with the children. But when those 4 girls became teenagers, he wasn't interested in them anymore. And their hearts broke.
That was a story that's in the Betty Lifton book?
Yeah, that's my aunt.
Her grandparents knew Korczak, who didn't get.
No, I did know that, I just didn't know they, because I was
Yeah.
reading the other book, so I got really into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I heard that story, I was like, he's just missing
So
a big piece of it.
So I read that,
Yeah.
and then I remembered that my mom, who was the younger sister, not the
Yeah.
one who told the story, but, and I thought, I think, I would hope that when you really pay attention to the child, then it affects everybody. Was it Jonathan who talked about the Safe and Sound project?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that what's safe for the child is sound for the whole family and for the whole organism. It sure made me miss the fact that I don't work with children anymore, because I think children and youth are who have kept me young my entire life. And I always feel like I got way more back from anybody that I ever taught than they got from me. But I think it's that, because he really saw each child. I mean, he had philosophies, he had overarching ideas, but he saw each child as somebody different. Not better, not worse, but just who they were. And I think that's a heck of a life lesson.
Yeah. Bronwyn?
I think many things, but also being a strength-based center for me, also needing to, push really hard for a long time to get young people more involved in the office, like not in a consultative way, but in an actual being a part. And there's always been pushback around, well, that's either too much responsibility or it's too much, or there's all these reasons given as to why we shouldn't incorporate it. And here are very specific, concrete examples to say it can work, it can do this. And the other piece around that is, as I said, it works sort of with outliers. But rather than saying like, well, these don't fit into these molds, where are the commonalities of all children? Where are the strengths of all children? And bringing those into conversation more than, well, yeah, we tried that and it doesn't work, we tried this and it doesn't work, because they're not normal, or, I mean, I'm generalizing drastically, but, where can we pull out that this is actually a strength of this person that fits with so many other young people, because often they're isolated.
You were talking about your feelings, and I was thinking, you just met 8 days ago, and I met you just 8 days ago. Just think of this, right? Today is the 11th, we all met first time. You never, well, maybe Alicia and Claire, yeah, but others you didn't know, right? And now we're sitting in this circle talking like real close people, let's say. I wouldn't say friends, but really people who understand each other and know enough of each other. Don't you think it's an amazing impact of Korczak on all of us? I'm sure all of us were through different classes. And it's the impact of the material, and the material is this personality of Korczak, who unites so much and who speaks in all different ways but resonates with each of you in all different ways. But he does, right?
I'd like to say something about that. Like, I was so glad to see Corinne today, because yesterday she was not here and I missed you.
We all missed you.
And I don't know you all that well, and it's the same with you when you're not here. And like Jacqueline hasn't been here for a while, and
Jacqueline wrote to me, she's teaching, but she was talking about how much she misses.
But I kind of miss her, and I'm so glad when I see people coming in. It's just like, I get up in the morning with no problems, and I keep going, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to see my group. In other settings, I don't even care much if somebody shows up or not, but I don't think it's special.
Why is that, you think?
Something to do with you too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, the chocolate.
That's the key word, yeah.
But I think also you've included all of us in the conversation the
But
entire time.
isn't it a usual thing, including
No,
students?
I don't think every educator or teacher has the ability
You
that
have
you
it in
do.
your eyes too, yeah? Like in it, you're even more than Korczak, because you have it for adults, where he didn't have that love, and you treat us with respect.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for this, but I think that's the only way educators should do. I never doubted it, but I was very lucky. I had an incredible father who was a famous professor, and I knew many students of his as a child, and I knew how much they enjoyed and how much he was social and outgoing, and they would come for him. And I think it's kind of, and my grandmother was a teacher, so it's kind of in the family. Yeah, but thank you very much, I appreciate this, because this is the biggest compliment I can get. I think it's this what, kept me in this profession all my life, because I never